Good morning, Miriam. Lovely to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
I'm excellent, thank you, and I'm excited to have a chat with you today.
Fantastic. So, Miriam, I always ask this question because I love life paths. I think we all take meandering life paths, and sometimes road is planned, sometimes it's not. What led you to where you are today? So you are the founder of Magnetic Money. You're an international speaker, best-selling author, a business owner, and you've gone from being a former finance professional into a career in helping people with money mindset, and you're a hypnotherapist as well. That sounds like a really unexpected path to me, but what were the things that led you to here?
I agree. It's a very unexpected path for me as well, but that's just life. I think if you live long enough, you keep surprising yourself. So, I'll condense the story, but I started like so many of us, going to uni, going into the corporate role, and I was originally an engineer. I worked in the oil and gas industry. I ended up going into corporate development, and I was on that fast track career path, and then turned around one day and went, I hate this. What am I doing here? And long story short, I went part-time for a while. That didn't really work. It was half the pay, half the hours, same workload. So I'm like, no, I don't think so. And ended up leaving that career altogether. And, in that time in between, I had children, two beautiful children, helped my then husband build his business up. And then fast forward a few years and our marriage ended. And I was kind of screwed, basically. And there I was with a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, and kind of a career that I considered defunct and didn't want to go back into anyway. And I definitely didn't want to go back into 9 to 5. So I decided that, that I needed flexibility, and eventually the road led me to starting my own business in finance, which initially I knew nothing about, but you can learn things. So I built that finance business, and that was amazing because it got me back on my feet financially. It taught me, it made me dive so deeply into my beliefs around what I was capable of and my self-worth. And, there's nothing like being in business to really make you dig deep into your mindset issues. Like, it's the biggest mindset journey ever. Then write a book, and that takes you to another level again, I think. So, in that journey, what was really interesting is, I had to overcome my own mindset issues and get myself sorted on the practical side of money, because I went from broke single mum to kind of resurrecting everything. And then I realized my clients were pretty much in the same boat in terms of, just because they had a great job with a great income didn't mean that they didn't have issues around money or mindset wobbles. And nobody knew how to manage money because it's just assumed that we know and we're not really taught. So that was really interesting. And then, once that business kind of settled down and was ticking along nicely, I decided that personal growth, coaching is really what I wanted to get into, particularly helping small business owners, people like myself who kind of went, I don't want the corporate thing anymore. I want to do my own thing. And it's interesting because initially I really resisted going anywhere near money in my coaching. I was like, I want to leave that behind. I don't want to deal with that anymore. I'd had enough of dealing with banks. And it took me a while to figure out that no, this is my special thing. Yes, I can help people, coach them to be really effective and do the things they need to do. But it's the money stuff that really holds us back, because it's actually not really about money, and no one knows how to manage it either. And so the two together really create a powerful force when you actually tap into them. So that's the short version of that story.
That's interesting, there's a kind of phoenix rising part of your story, that real being in a situation where suddenly your whole life path changes in any and I think sometimes when you get that a divorce experience or some other experience where suddenly everything you banked on or you were planning for is no longer an available option for you. It's a very difficult experience. I've gone through that twice, so I know what that's like, and I sort of describe it as almost like you take your skin and you you pull it off yourself. You know, it's almost like you're creating your inside out, because you have to peel off your skin and then start again.
Yeah.
And it's
Wow.
that is incredible transformations. So it sounds like you've really found a path through that. And I love that, particularly the path that you chose. Perhaps you were rejecting some of the things that you're good at the start, and then you've gone back to that. And because I think sometimes we feel like we have to throw it all out. So was that
Absolutely.
your experience? You know, you didn't want the corporate lifestyle. Obviously, you had a skill set, but you didn't want the lifestyle that comes with that. And so you sort of thought, I don't want to, do this anymore. And
Yeah.
particularly going back into coaching, and then your skill set is actually still there. So you're then applying that financial acumen to your coaching.
Absolutely. I think that especially when you go through something like a divorce or ditching your career like I did, which was considered just outrageous at the time.
Yes.
What are you doing? You're an engineer, you're on the corporate fast track, you're reporting directly to the board of directors. And I was like, I don't care. I don't want to do this anymore. And people thought I was a bit nuts. And so, that and divorce is similar in that I found it was a real identity crisis. I'd gotten married very young as well, and I just didn't even know who I was outside of that. And so, yes, it's very easy to just go, I want a fresh start. I want to leave it all behind. And it did take a while to kind of go, no, actually, engineering and my corporate career taught me so many amazing skills. And yes, I don't want the career, but the skills are there. And definitely the finance business and everything I had to go through in putting my life back together taught me so much. And to kind of bring it back and go, no, this is like the unique pieces of the puzzle that make me me. And then being allowed to reinvent it and serve people in whatever way I choose that I think is going to be really helpful. It's just brilliant. Like, I just love that when we're in our own business, we get to make it up as we go and we get to decide how we want to put it all together. And yeah, I think it's really important to not just try to discard parts of ourselves, but to embrace them and bring them forward. Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, fantastic. And so tell me a little bit about your approach to money. I know that you talk about money archetypes in the book. So tell me a little bit about the premise that you've written about and your model for money mindset. Because I've heard many people talk about money mindset, but I think you've got a really great way of making it simple, making the complex simple, and then also very practical. So give us what's the back read of your book? What's the
Yeah.
the
Yeah. So the making things simple, I think that's the engineering. I'm like, thank you.
yeah.
Thank you for teaching me all of that. So basically my approach is I sum it up by saying I marry the magical with the practical. So over the years, interestingly, I was very in the closet about being into law of attraction, but being a geek, of course, I was online for 6 months listening into Stanford quantum physics lectures because I wanted the scientific angle of all of that. And it's really interesting because whether you talk positive psychology or you talk quantum physics or you just talk law of attraction manifesting, it's the same thing, just different languages. So that was of interest, and particularly when I had to rebuild. And then mindset is really, to me, about the stories that we've been programmed with and that we tell ourselves, right? And then the third part of the puzzle is the practical. So the practical is actually having the confidence and knowing what to do with our money, particularly for small business owners. It kind of all becomes this mess of, I don't even know what's my business's money, what's my money, am I getting paid? I don't know. And so that is a huge mindset issue, having lack of confidence around finances, just lack of not even so much worrying about money, but just feeling like I'm faking it. I've got this imposter syndrome that I'm supposed to know what to do with my money and I'm just pretending, which a lot of people do. I refer to this epidemic of silent money shame. It's about marrying the magical with the practical and approaching your mindset and energetic alignment practices with the practical stuff backing it up, and vice versa. So the way I teach people to put their money system together will actually take into account the way it affects their mindset. So sometimes I'll go, you know what? Yes, mathematically, this makes more sense. But if that's going to make you feel a sense of lack and reinforce some really negative stories, then let's not go that way. Let's take another route that will actually boost your mindset. So it's about actually thinking about the interplay of the two.
Interesting. Actually, I did do a conversation on this podcast with Topa Tyler. He just finished a PhD on the impact of positive intention. So he actually quantified the magical that you're talking about. And he was looking at a performance in a swim team, but he did a double blind study where he showed that positive intention by someone else or can actually improve performance of swimmers. So if there is this, I feel like that science and, the magical or the positive psychology that you're talking about does come together. There is some really interesting science that is showing the benefit of that. But even at an energetic level, when we feel better about what we're doing, when we feel, for example, when we're not in fear around what we're doing, there's this element of energy that comes into the day. It comes into, our ability to motivate ourselves to do those tasks we know will get us to an outcome. So I feel like I really love your approach, Miriam, because I feel like sometimes, and many life coaches, they may have methodologies, but then they focus on the issue of just mindset without the science or without the practical application. Because I believe that you really have to put in plans, you have to plan for some practical steps to achieve a goal. You can't, the misnomer around just think it and it'll happen. I feel like there's more to that story.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my big things that got me through the divorce and broke single mum period was The Secret had come out, and I used to watch it a lot. And the interesting thing is, one of the teachers on that was Mike Dooley, and I really loved his approach because it was very simple. He just went, thoughts become things. He was literally my standout teacher. Now I actually get to work with him. So thoughts do become things, because I would sit there thinking, wow, it'd be so cool to meet him one day and maybe to do something like this. But the thing with The Secret is, it was really just the headline. And I think a lot of people kind of dismissed it from that, going, well, you can't just sit around visualizing money falling from the sky and then suddenly it appears. Well, no, of course not. But your intention and the energy with which you approach things is everything. Like, it's incredibly critical. And especially in business, we put offers out. We do discovery calls with potential clients, and the energy with which we come to that makes a huge difference. People can sense desperation from a mile away, and it's not a very attractive odor, right?
That's right. Exactly. I agree. That's beautiful, Miriam. So you were talking about confidence. So let's go back to that, because I think you're right. We don't get taught about how to manage money or what money means or should mean in our lives. And particularly, I think women, we're not necessarily socialized in that. Do you find a difference between women and men, or is it, are you finding that right across all sorts of business leaders?
Look, I think it is very much across the board, but it's different for women in that we're also programmed to give and to serve, right? And so I think women have even more issues around setting their prices, raising their prices, chasing up invoices. There's always this, but I want to help everybody element, which is, I think part nature, part nurture. Mm-hmm. And so that in itself adds a really weird thing, because then there's a sense of guilt around, I'm asking for money, when this comes so easily to me, especially when we're working in our zone of genius. To us, it's obvious and simple. And to other people, it's like, what is this black magic you practice, Yeah,
exactly.
And the two areas that I focus on the practical side are money management and time management, like effectiveness. And they're things that, to me, are completely simple and straightforward, and to other people are just, like a lifelong mystery. So, yeah, I find that particularly coaches like myself and service-based business providers, there is a lot of that across the board. And then if you add that whole element of when the money comes in, I'm not sure that I'm doing the right thing with it. Why is it that whenever the money comes in, it seems to disappear? I've just had a record month. Why do I still feel like I'm not getting anywhere? Mm-hmm. That is a constant undermining. You know, it's constantly kind of white anting away at that confidence. And of course, that affects everything, even if we're not consciously aware of it, that we're then putting out to call the money in.
Yeah, fabulous. And is that related to some of the art? Because I know the archetypes you talk about. There's three of them. Let's go into that, because I think that really I love your, again, your archetypes are very simple, and I can totally relate to one of those archetypes in particular. Perhaps you could describe what those archetypes are.
Yeah. So there's different kind of money archetypes out there, and a lot of them are very personality based. But I approach it differently. I approach it through what I call money habit archetypes, and that's why there's only three. And it describes kind of the general pattern you have without money. Because the thing is that more money doesn't change your money pattern; it just amplifies it. And so the three archetypes are: number one, the overextender, which is the one where no matter how much money you give them, they always end up managing to dig themselves in a little bit deeper. My dad was like that. You know, if he had some money, he would go get a car loan, you know, put it down as a deposit on a car loan. So he would actually, his net worth would always be shrinking. Then there's the spender, which is a really common pattern where money comes in and it's all gone again. So I'll come back to what's driving them in a minute. And the third one is the accumulator, which I actually deal mostly with people who are natural born accumulators. And that means that, you know, they're always hoarding some for a rainy day. Now, that on the face of it sounds great. You know, that's the pattern we all want to aspire to. But the question is it coming from a healthy place, or is it coming from a place of fear? Because an accumulator will always feel like it's not enough, no matter what their level of income. And the best example I always give is, you know, Gay Hendricks' book, The Big Leap. He talks about one of his clients who was a billionaire who would argue with his wife about buying the expensive toilet paper. Right. So that's an accumulator pattern. Like, I'm worth billions of dollars, but I'm going to fixate on how much the toilet paper costs and let that throw me. So more money doesn't change your money pattern. So looking at those archetypes is a really great invitation to then look at what's under the hood. You know, what are the stories? What are the programs that are actually driving that pattern and keeping it alive? And is it a pattern that's coming from a healthy place? And, you know, going back to the spender, which so many people go, oh, yeah, that's me. A lot of them are actually accumulators who think they don't qualify to be called an accumulator. So that's how much people mess with their own heads. Does that make sense?
Tell me a little bit more about that. So, for example, if I'm a spender, my habit is to spend, why am I also an accumulator? Is that what you're saying? Or perhaps you're saying something different?
So there is accumulator and spender. And sometimes, yes, they overlap slightly. But many people will say, I'm a spender, but they're actually not. They're just an accumulator who's being extra hard on themselves, because the whole accumulator pattern is, I'm not doing enough, I'm not saving enough, I'm not safe yet, there's not enough in the bank. And so every time they spend money on themselves, they feel bad about it. Whereas a true spender is like, yeah, there's plenty more coming in tomorrow. Let's not worry about it. Let's enjoy it while it's here, right?
Okay.
So that's the difference. The spender doesn't really have that much of a guilty conscience.
Right. Okay. Fantastic. And it's interestingly, so you find that many of your clients are of a particular type. Is there a reason for that, do you think, Miriam?
Well, I think that if you truly are an accumulator, then you're driven to figure it out and figure out how to achieve, you know, how to make the discomfort go away, how to achieve the financial stability and actually feel secure and financially stable, because you can be financially stable and secure on paper and still not feel it. And I think the accumulator in particular is driven towards that. Whereas a true spender is like, you know, I'm okay with it. I know it's not really in my best interests, but I feel okay with that. It's just how I like to do life. So they don't actually have the impetus to want to change so much.
Transform.
And let's not even talk about the overextender. They're just happily going broke.
Boom and bust, right? Boom and bust. Yes, yes. And where do we learn these habits? Where do you think we learn these habits?
I think they come in really early. So I have a quiz that helps people kind of look into their archetype. And one of the questions is, what did you do with your pocket money as a child? You know,
Mm.
were you the kind of kid that would always squirrel some away and maybe spend the rest? Or were you the kind of kid that would just go out, blow it all instantly? Or were you the kid that then also borrowed your siblings' money, you know, or maybe just helped yourself to it and got the bigger toy with it. And so, you know, these patterns start really early. And so we go through life and we carry the pattern with us and we keep reinforcing it through the experiences we have, because we'll filter everything through our beliefs, right? Every experience is filtered through the screen of our perception to then match our underlying belief system. So it's that early childhood programming that puts it in place, and maybe some of those experiences, and then we just keep reinforcing it over and over and over again, because we then filter reality and go, there's proof, there's more proof, there's more proof. And so yeah, it's an invitation to then look at, is where did that come from? Is that serving me? Is it even true?
So sometimes those beliefs are very deeply ingrained. It's very difficult to change beliefs. So what kind of work do you do to lead people into that transformation? So once they've realized they want to look at it, what are the next steps there?
Yeah, changing those beliefs and programs it can be incredibly challenging because they're unconscious, right? So we don't half the time even know exactly what's going on. That's the definition of an unconscious belief. Once you become aware of it, you're consciously aware of it, you're actually in a position of power. So unearthing it and like uncovering it is the tricky bit. And when I first started coaching, I wasn't a hypnotherapist. I was a very frustrated coach because people just couldn't get past that unconscious programming, those patterns that kept pulling them back, you know, where they didn't want to be. And that's why I became a hypnotherapist, because I figured punching clients in the nose probably wasn't the right way to go. So hypnotherapy is fantastic because you can just bypass the critical factors and go straight to the root cause and see things through that lens. And if you help the unconscious see another way to keep you safe, another belief or story that will serve you better and keep you safe, it'll go, cool, no worries, because that's its job, right? And so that's why I love hypnosis. I develop a lot of hypnosis-based processes for my students because I don't do a lot of one-on-one work, and I'm really about teaching a man to fish. So I will create and develop processes with audios and worksheets that they can go through to kind of start shifting and examining those things. So hypnotherapy, hypnosis is huge because it's quick and direct and actually transform things where they make a difference rather than trying to battle against willpower. And then just in really simple terms, a couple of the tools I love to give people is learning how to ask resourceful questions, because it taps into your unconscious, right? So actually examining things like slowing it down, going, whoa, what's all that about? Why? I wonder why this keeps happening. I wonder what story I'm telling myself. I wonder where that came from. I wonder if it's even true. Is that serving me? I wonder what's another story that could serve me even better that is also true. I wonder if I can see evidence of that already. And it shifts your focus and it gives all these commands to your unconscious to actually start looking for evidence of something that is going to serve you so much better.
Right.
And so it's kind of a conscious, unconscious approach, you know, coming at it from both ends.
So I love that because that's like a what if methodology where you're allowing for perhaps another set of possibilities and then looking for evidence that could be already happening. That's wonderful. And with some people who haven't experienced hypnosis, I think, because sometimes I think hypnosis has a bit of a bad rap. You know, we see it perhaps expressed in film and, you know, in quite a derogatory way sometimes. If people haven't ever experienced hypnosis, what could they experience in a hypnosis? For example, you're practicing hypnosis on me. What would I experience? What would it feel like for
Yeah.
me? What would I be doing?
Yeah, and you're quite right. A lot of people have a lot of preconceived notions because of stage hypnosis, right? Which is
That's true.
entertainment.
Yeah.
Yeah,
entertainment.
it's
Yeah.
entertainment. So hypnosis is a really natural process. Going into a state of trance is something we do many times a day naturally. Every time we've all experienced that, sitting in the car, we're driving along, we're thinking about what we need to do for dinner. Exactly. What happened earlier, what's going to happen later. And suddenly you think, oh my God, I can't remember, crossing the last 5 intersections because you were in a trance. So that's what it is. It's just a deeply relaxed state and you're still aware, you still know what's going on. So when we do a hypnosis session, I will say to people, if you feel like you're making it up, that's fine. You're doing it right. And, there's a reason certain things will pop up over others. There's a million different possibilities as to what your unconscious could present. And there's a reason why that one came up. And even if you go back to memories, if it's a hallucination and that's what your unconscious needs to hallucinate in order for you to figure this out and move through it, like, is that okay? If it's not even a real memory, if it's just a hallucination that helps you get the job done. I do tend to work with people who are comfortable with hypnosis, so I don't have to do a lot of that. But in my training, it was often the whole first session is just all about that, all about just getting people to a state where they're comfortable, because you do have to be comfortable and trusting. I'm just the tour guide. It's your unconscious that's doing the work. But if you're not willing to go there, then there's nothing in the world I can do to force you, because your unconscious's job is to keep you safe.
Yes. Yeah. So there's a trust is everything, I think, in that with that relationship with the therapist is what you're saying, or the coach. Absolutely. And this is why I think training and qualifications in hypnotherapy are really important. And I know that there is a professional association that has standards in hypnotherapy. And so I work with hypnotherapists as well, and as
Yeah.
co-facilitators. So I really value their input. So, Miriam, let's go a little bit sort of wider. When I think about, so that's me, changing perhaps my thoughts and my habits around money and the story I tell myself around money. But then I look at the world and I look at social media, and there are some real trends that worry me, actually. I have young nieces and nephews, and I really worry about the messages that they're getting. There's this sort of billionaire success story that is almost like a template for success around money. The way in which wealth is defined is about accumulating possessions, and the major brands, fashion brands, or whatever kind of brands, they really really manipulate that. Do you have thoughts about that wider environment and how that affects our money mindset, or perhaps our understanding of what success is around money?
Yeah, I have the same concerns. It's a really toxic environment. And I think that, when it comes down to money mindset, it comes down to self-worth and self-belief. Ultimately, whenever I work with people who are maybe trying to grow their business and we're working one-on-one, the one reflects in the many and vice versa. It comes down to self-belief, self-worth. And, we literally have all these weird sayings, like we say, oh, do you know how much they're worth? Or how much are you worth? So our self-worth somehow gets linked to financial success. And that's a bit concerning in itself. And then because the money mindset stuff really is ultimately about I feeling worthy and deserving of having abundance, having an abundance of success of every type, including financial, oversupply, so I can then do whatever I want with it. Do I feel comfortable, confident, and worthy of that? And so then being programmed with that, you should, because that's what makes you a good person. It just really messes with all of that. So I think a really important thing for people to do is actually be able to disconnect from all of that and think, well, what is actually my definition of success? Because it doesn't have to be millions of dollars in the bank. Like, what are you going to do with it? You're going to swim in the money? You're going to fill your swimming pool with it? People want to be abundant for all sorts of reasons. Maybe it's just so they can spend lots of time with their kids. Maybe it's so they can create a charity or build a school. It can be so many things. And I always remember Bob Proctor, who was one of my early kind of mentors saying, you have a responsibility to be as rich as possible, because when you're rich, it means you've been of a lot of service to others. And so, that's kind of some really interesting mindset shifts. But when it becomes all about the money, I think then it just makes us lose that connection with what truly makes us happy and lights us up, and becomes a very empty thing where we're just trying to put on a great brave face, have the great looking Instagram stories, and we're still empty inside. So that's a really slippery slope.
It is. Yes, I'm concerned about that as a sort of a trend or a narrative, because unless we keep talking about money in this way, and that's why I'm so glad you're here, Miriam. There's no counter narrative to that, because entertainment blows that up and amplifies it and fans that narrative, and then we see it. I know that my nephews, for example, they're glued to TikTok, and I know that that's what they see. And so even to the point when I ask them, what are you looking forward to? What do you want to do with yourself, when you leave school, or what are you passionate about? They'll talk about how much money they want to make, and it's feel in a state of anxiety about that response.
Yeah.
So there's got to be a counter narrative to that, about what you're talking about. It's, who do you want to be in the world? What service do you want to make to your family, or to others? What legacy do you want to leave to others? And that could be, the impact in your family community at a small scale, or globally, the world. It depends on sort of where your goals are, and they're all, for me, all of those are, people are achieving goals at that level. That's success for me. So it's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think having conversations with each other about money is really important.
Yeah, I think it's really important to have these conversations. And, when you think about how big an issue mental health is, especially in young people these days, it's really concerning. And it's because they're missing that deeper connection with themselves. And, I think it goes back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where, you've got the shelter, food, but then ultimately it's about self-actualization and then actually being of service, like feeling like you're here for a purpose and a reason, and there's more to life than just this kind of biology mass that's just exists for a while, does some stuff, and then disappears again. And so I think it's really important that all of us as a society keep reminding our young people of that, and, try to help them move through that scale. We all get enamored with pretty shiny things. I've done it, but I think it's recognizing that it's part of the journey, but to then keep moving them beyond that, I think might be probably a more successful and healthy approach, rather than going stop it, because we all know stop it doesn't really work, does it?
That's right. And so, Miriam, where can people find you? Where can they find the book? Because I'm hoping that this has inspired people to question themselves. If they want to do your quiz, where's the best place for them to find you?
So just hop on my website, which is miriamcastilla.com. The quiz is /quiz, the book, which looks like that. It's available on Amazon, but you can go via my website and actually get a free checklist and some free calculators to go with it. And then it'll give you all the links depending on where you are in the world to go grab the book.
Great. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Miriam. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you for being here.
It's been a total pleasure. Thank you for having me.